Throughout time, people across the world told each other tales of how they came to be, of heroes and monsters, romance and tragedy, death and rebirth. Mythology helped shape the ancient world, explaining the unexplainable. This is Mythology Unleashed. Among the most mystifying and easily identifiable gods of folklore is a horned being called Cernunnos. A visually striking god, adorned with the antlers of a stag, bearing a Celtic torc about his neck and in his hand, and a small purse filled with coin or grain. He was sometimes portrayed with serpent legs, a man's torso with the head of a bull or a ram, or even with 3 faces. Coiled about one of his arms is a serpent with the horns of a ram, while an assortment of beasts of the field and forest surround him. Cernunnos is heavily associated with nature, hunting, animals, fauna, fruit, grain, fertility, and prosperity, and in some legends he is even the ruler of the underworld or otherworld, the opener of the gates between life and death. But what makes Cernunnos so mysterious a being is that we truly know little about his character or his roles in mythology, as there are few surviving texts pertaining to him and other ancient Celtic gods. Cernunnos is the Latin name given to this mysterious Celtic deity, and is usually translated as the Horned One, derived from an Indo-European root word, cur, meaning growth. The name Cernunnos has appeared only once, on the Pillar of the Boatmen, carved in what is now Paris, France, sometime during the 1st century, possibly erected by a guild of Celtic sailors, and housed beneath Notre Dame Cathedral. The pillar depicts a number of Roman and Gaelic gods, Cernunnos counted among them. In this depiction, Cernunnos' torcs hung around his antlers, rather than his neck or his hands, though the bottom tier of the pillar remains missing, leading many to believe the original carving depicted him as sitting cross-legged, and would most likely have held an additional torc. Perhaps the most famous image of Cernunnos, or another nameless god who is nonetheless associated as Cernunnos, is upon the Gundestrup cauldron. Discovered in a Danish peat bog in 1891 and dated to the 1st or 2nd century before Common Era, Cernunnos sits cross-legged, surrounded by forest animals and plant life, holding a ram-horned serpent in one hand and a torc in the other. However, these and other visual representations of the horned god as a part of the Celtic pantheon predate such inscriptions and names by centuries. Some go as far back as the 7th century before Common Era, from various different parts of Western Europe. Some have even conjectured how the horned deity was venerated as a shamanic god of the hunt since prehistoric times. In essence, while scholars prescribe the theonym Cernunnos to the horned god of the Celts, the deity in itself is far older than the conventional name. And while it is unknown exactly who had worshipped Cernunnos, it is clear that horned gods were commonly worshipped throughout the Celtic world, as his image appears throughout Europe, from Ireland to Romania, with the oldest surviving image from the 4th century before Common Era in the Italian Alps, a time when they were under Celtic occupation. Much of what is said about Cernunnos' character and role is modern speculation based upon these ancient images. Most commonly, he is seen as a lord of wild things, and rules over pristine nature and uncivilized ways. He is depicted as being surrounded by animals loyal to him, who may embody his traits, such as the stag, namely a red deer, the bull, the boar, the raven, and wild dogs. He is depicted as a mediator of man and nature, able to tame predator and prey alike, so they might lie down together in harmony. Like many other deities associated with hunting and gathering, it is likely a prayer was invoked before any animals or wild vegetation were gathered from his forest. His association with nature, animals, and hunting have led some to interpret him as a god of death or the underworld, as death is a prominent part of the natural world. In many neo-pagan practices, Cernunnos is widely worshipped, often attributed to the changing of the seasons and masculine energy. Like a stag's antlers that shed at the end of the rut and the beginning of the winter, his power wanes only to regrow in spring, stronger, more beautiful than before. Some even interpret Cernunnos and other horned gods' legends to have evolved into interpretations of the Green Man, a nature spirit who represents rebirth and new growth of the springtime season. Though the truth of this mysterious figure is lost to history, Cernunnos is a fascinating figure indeed. His role in mythology, his attributes as a character, even his true name remain undiscovered, due in part to few, if any, surviving Gallic Celtic literature pertaining to him, as well as attempted eradication by the Christian Church. But, like a stag's antlers in the spring, Cernunnos' legend seems to have begun its regrowth. Beasts and birds, flowers and vegetation, seasons and nature, hunting and harvest, fertility and wealth, life and death, all attributed, correctly or wrongly, to the horned god. Whatever the truth may be about him and his being, his appearance as an antlered god of the wild, with animals in tow and Torc in hand, paint Cernunnos as the ultimate embodiment of the natural world.